It's time.
Time minutes started before. 20, 30 minutes.
Okay. All right. I kind of thought that I wanted to do this mostly like a question and answer. But what I'm gonna do is go kind of back and forth. You know, I'm gonna switch up a lot of my slides and just kind of jump back and forth and give you all some stuff today. So, hello, this is Fair Housing over here, and this is me. So if you want to take a picture of that, take a picture of it. And the one thing about this is that if you email me, I'll answer you. It may not be the same day because it's like emails, they multiply, but I'll answer you. I'm still at DPOR, and Fair Housing, you know, is my love. One of the things I want to talk to you about, first of all, especially having the landlords here, is something called implicit bias. We all have it, folks. Implicit bias is that subconscious of yours. And people always think that it's only based on racism or sexism, but it goes a lot deeper than that. Sometimes what you've learned over your experiences have influenced how you feel about people. So this implicit bias could be based on their body size, the way they speak, their age, sexual orientation. So these are things that we need to be conscious of. I have this example here, and I cannot help but to show it. And I want you to take a really good look at it, because if this is supposed to be a children's educational tool, then we know where this education is leading to. If you look at it, you'll see that the kids that are of Caucasian, look like they're Caucasian, are all very positive. They are happy and they are proud, while the children of color are sad and angry. This, when I saw this, it says, no wonder people are coming across, especially when there is an assertive Black woman around, and she's looked at as an angry woman, not looked at as somebody who knows what they're doing. So these are things that we carry into life. And then I looked at this one here, and the first person that you see has a hijab on. The only reason they're asking about if she was born in Canada is because she has a hijab on her head. What does the hijab have to do with her being approved to be a resident in that community? It has nothing. This is about religion. And religion is protected under the Fair Housing Law. Another thing is, here in the United States, we have one of the highest populations of Muslims. The other individual in this illustration, he's being asked, you have a mental disability? You seem perfectly normal to me. Now, coming from a housing perspective, if somebody is saying that to a person who's asking for a reasonable accommodation, maybe to have an ESA animal, you know, or to maybe, you know, get something done that would be positive for them so that they can live and enjoy life just like any able-bodied person. That person is looking at this going, do they not believe that I have a mental disability? And oh, by the way, what does a mental disability look like? The other one, this one here, folks. Oh, let me tell you, when I saw this, this is blatant. This is pure blatant, because you know they even had the audacity of putting a woman of color who we know wear bonnets. But did they ask men to take their caps off? How about other women coming in with their hats on? No, they didn't ask that. All they said is, this is not allowed in our rental office. Well, this is an opening for a complaint based on fair housing. And it is very, very obvious of what is going on. So implicit bias, I even have ways that you can try to mitigate those implicit biases and try to make life better, especially if you're in the housing business. So I'm gonna skip again. And here I want you to know that the reason why we focus so much on land and housing is because if you want to create wealth for your family, the way to create wealth is through housing. When you own land, according to our famous Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if you want to create wealth, you have to own land. When you own your home, you can start a business. Instead of taking out those burdensome loans, you can write a check based on your equity for your child to go to school. That's why so many kids are able to go to school that are not minority kids, because of the land that they've had in their families that have passed down. Well, the African American community, every time they tried to put that together, it was taken away from them. Whether it was burned down, they were murdered, they were duped into signing paperwork, it was taken from them. So I'm going to skip again, I'm going to skip again, I'm going to skip again, and I'm going to go to the Fair Housing Law. This was signed on April 11th, 1968. This law will be 55 years old. Now, folks, look at how long the first set of Africans came to this United States. That was 403 years ago. And you drop 55 years into that, it's just a little drop in the bucket. Martin Luther King was the one that the law was signed in homage to, because his life was taken out. Had it not been for his life taken out, we'd probably be still sitting there waiting. So when the law was first enacted, we only had 4 protected classes. At that time, race and color was probably the primary reason why people were being discriminated against. And that was to protect those who were African and those who were of African descent. National origin was to protect those who were born outside of the US or their descendants were born outside of the US. Yet we have the Native Americans under this group. Totally wrong. If anybody is a native of this country, it's them. So why are they on this list? But on this list is also the Africans, the Irish, the Mexicans, and the Chinese. Religion. Our forefathers said, this country will not be based on one sole religion. This country was going to have an opening so that anyone who wanted to have a religion were able to do so. If you didn't want to have a religion, you were also able to do so. But yet, every time we talk about law, we bring up religion. Even though, even in the Bible, it says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what's God. Well, fair housing didn't stop there. Later on, other people started letting you know that they were being discriminated too. And one of those set of people were women. Women were being discriminated against. Women had no power. I don't care what color you were. You had no power. And even today, we're still being treated as second-class citizens. So had it not been for those old girls who got out there and sang that wonderful song, I am woman, hear me roar, we probably wouldn't have fair housing today either for women. There were women who told me that even though they had money, they couldn't get housing. Some of them even had to go as far as marrying boyfriends to get their housing and then annulling the marriage. Why should we have to go through all that? That protection is only 49 years old. And then you have familial status and disability that were enacted in the same year. These two, how long have women been having babies? How long have we been having disabilities? Yes, that protection is only 35 years old this year. So, as we can see, we have now the Virginia Fair Housing Law, and that came about because the federal law said, we're not going to be selfish. We're going to let you go ahead and have your laws in your states. And even within the states, localities can have law. So Virginia enacted their law in 1972. We are 51 years old this year. Virginia also is the first Southern state to have a fair housing law, first office, government office to partner with HUD, and we added new fair housing protected classes. Source of funds, sexual orientation, gender identity, and veteran status was then amended and turn to military status. We have 2 locations that have their own fair housing laws. That's Fairfax County and Roanoke. Both of them protect you under marital status because southern states have a law that says you shall not cohabitate if you're not married. They also, in Roanoke, they also protect you under age. You see, there's no protection between the ages of 19 and 54. But in Roanoke, if a landlord does not want to rent to someone, say under the age of 25, that would not work in Roanoke. That person would be able to file a complaint in Roanoke and it would be handled in the Roanoke courts. There's one more location looking to have their fair housing law, and that location is Charlottesville. So what I'm going to do is kind of mosey on through. We now have 12 protected classes. We have the 7 from the federal law, which is what was back here. That's the federal law. Disability, race, sex, color, national origin, religion, and familial status. And then Virginia added elderliness in 1983, which is protecting those who are elderly, source of funds, sexual orientation, gender identity, and military status. Well, it was veteran status and it was changed to military status. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the new protected classes and talk about those, because every year we've talked about the old ones. So I'm kind of hoping that some of the other, I'm leaving something for other ladies to talk about that they can put in. So let me talk about the new protected classes that we have, which is some that are, you know, still causing some landlords to believe that they can kind of like ignore the law. So the first one that we want to talk about is source of funds, which was a protected class that many fought to get, because Virginia had it where when it came to Section 8, it was a voluntary basis. Well, that is no longer so as of July 1, 2020. As of July 1, 2020, you cannot deny any type of legitimate source of funds of a person. Okay, so whether it is child support, SSI, SSDI, whether it is unemployment, alimony, all those have to be accepted. Now, there are exemptions under the law, and the exemptions say that if there's an owner of 4 units or less rental dwellings in Virginia, then that person is exempt. It also says that if there's an owner or entity that owns 10% or less of the rental units in Virginia, then they too are exempt. If the unit is not able to pass the 15-day inspection so that the person can use the housing choice voucher, then that's another reason, but that cannot be the same reason all the time, because then we're going to be looking at it going, something ain't right here, because you keep saying that you can't meet the 15-day inspection when you know you're going to have a 15-day inspection. So what is prohibited under these acts? If folks are saying things like, we don't take SSI, SSDI, we do not participate in any payment programs, we don't take Section 8. These are things under the law, under fair housing law, even if you are part of the exemption, if you advertise in a discriminatory way, you will lose your exemption. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is that we just had a case in DC. In that case, several housing providers were caught, even with their emails, talking about ways to, I guess, not accept Section 8 vouchers. Well, let me just give you an update on that. Those folks paid a civil penalty of $10 million to fair housing. Civil penalty. That's not any type of penalty, any type of settlement for people that may have been aggrieved. That's just civil penalties alone. In one of the emails, the person said they were going to do everything that they could to not accept Section 8 vouchers. They even told people that if they had to go ahead and rent to them, to put them in the units that were not renovated and to do everything that they could do. Not only did they have to pay that $10 million, but many of them lost the ability to run their own communities. It is now being given to a third party to run. Another thing that is happening is that one of the folks, I guess it's the person that wrote all those things in the emails, her license were taken away for the next 15 years. She cannot work in property management, nor can she work in real estate for the next 15 years. And I'm sure if she were to come to Virginia and we do a background check on her, she will not be working in Virginia either. So, and that's the information there. So I'm going to share some of this with DeAndre so that he can share with you all. And that way, you know, you all will find out what is going on. Sexual orientation is about a person's perceived or, you know, assumed heterosexuality, bisexuality, and homosexuality. But let me just give you another little hint. When President Johnson signed this bill into law, he said that this law, the fair housing law, is for all. And when just in case you did not understand what he meant, he said all human beings who live in this country. Do you understand? All human beings who live in this country. So if these people are human beings and they're able to pass the requirements, they're able to be approved for the apartment, then they need to have it. You know, we need to stop being into people's business and try to do what the law says we need to do. Gender identity, that is about a person that may have been born one sex, but their brain has told them that they are not that sex, they are the opposite sex. And who are we to tell them that's different? And thinking about the way people have been treating, thinking about the high incidence of mortality for many of these, who gets up in the morning and decides off the cuff that they want to be the opposite sex that day? I don't think so. Veteran status to military status. It so happened that in the beginning, we had amended the law and added veteran status, but that only protected those who were out of the military under an honorable discharge. If you were dishonorably discharged, then you weren't going to have the protection. So now the military status has broadened that protection. The military status now says that whether you are active duty or reserve, whether you are a veteran or retired, and your dependents, you will all have protection under this law. Disability, I just want to remind you that when it comes to disability, there is no discrimination with disability. Anybody can have a disability. So when your residents come to you, whether it's an adult for themselves or an adult speaking out for a child, you have to act on it. Reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications are the two equalizers for people with disabilities. And one of the main things you need to understand is that when we look at people with disabilities, we do base it on the definition of disability based on the ADA's definition. We didn't have to recreate it. The ADA already had it. So what they have said is that whether the person has a physical or a mental disability, they both hold the same weight. but you have to have some type of impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities in order to have a disability. So as usual, I use my favorite, which is the sugar. Here in the South, we don't say diabetes, we say the sugar. So if you have the sugar and you are taking care of yourself, you are dieting, you are exercising, according to the definition, you don't have a disability. But if you have the sugar and you have lost a toe, you have lost a foot, you can no longer see because your sight has been taken. You can no longer freely void because your kidneys have shut down. Then the law looks at you a disability. The law also says that if there's someone that can verify that you have this disability, and that someone can be your doctor, psychologist, but then it can be third parties too, your caseworker, social worker, peer support group. And oftentimes we forget one group of people that we tend to not want to ask because we assume that they're going to tell us things that are not true. But if there's a mother taking care of a child, if there is a daughter taking care of her mother, who knows that person better than that person that is taking care of them? So let me just tell you that even when they go to the doctor, you know what the doctor is going to say? Hey, what do you want me to write in this letter? Why? Because that person knows them a whole lot better. The last one is my favorite. The last one says, regarded as having such impairment. So if somebody is assumed to be a person with a disability and they have been discriminated against, even though they don't have a disability, they are able to file a complaint based on disability. And that is because the housing provider has assumed, viewed them, or perceived them as to having a disability. So if a person is asking for a reasonable accommodation or modification, what they have to first do is show that they have a disability. Once they have shown that, they have to show that there's a relationship between the disability and what their request is. Sometimes it's obvious. So if it's obvious, they don't need to bring you a verification. But if it's not obvious, then they have to show that unless they get this change, it's going to affect their ability to have use and enjoyment of housing. The request has to be reasonable, and of course, there is unreasonable. The landlord has to get into a dialogue and have a conversation because sometimes you can have a plan. And the landlord has to look at this in good faith, because if he doesn't, and it could alleviate the issue, then that landlord could be finding themselves in a fair housing violation. I will say that two of your best fair reasonable accommodations, the most popular one is the one looking for animals. So we know that dogs and horses are the only two service animals, because service animals have to have a specific job under the ADA. But when it comes to fair housing, any animal can be an emotional support and assistance or a companion animal. So I have several here, and we're not going to go into all of these, but you can see that they're helping people. And I would say that that picture on the bottom there, yeah, that's me beside Tucker the pig, all right? That is me. I was trying to look real cute because Tucker the pig was supposed to be only 90 pounds of pig, but he was 250 pounds of pig. And I figured I'd just sit beside him and look like a smoking tin beside him. But this was an awesome pig that helps a family right here in Virginia. They lost a child and they wanted to do their healing in a holistic way. Unfortunately, mama is very allergic to dogs, and I guess somebody told them about pigs, and it so happened that Tucker has become a real big part of the family. So yeah. One of the things I need to tell you though is that therapy animals are not considered service animals under the ADA. Therapy animals are not considered assistance, emotional support, companion animal. Why? It's because under the law, when you have an animal, the animal has to be for the benefit of the resident. So therapy animals are usually taken to even, senior homes just to make people feel better. So what they're saying is that it's not directly for disabilities only. So I need to skip through because I want to get to some of this really important stuff. I need to skip through and talk to you about the good stuff that is happening around here with fair housing. Fair housing has exemptions. I want to remind you about those exemptions. It's 3 single-family homes or less that would have an exemption of an owner. It's an owner who resides in the building where they are also renting, that they would be exempt from following the law. It would be single-family homes that are rented and sold without the use of real estate agents or brokers. Once a real estate agent or broker tells you that, they would take on your home, then they have to disclose 24/7 that they are regulated under the law. And it has even come to the attention, a lot of people give their properties to management companies and real estate agents to run those properties. Let me just remind you that those folks have to follow the fair housing law. So sometimes, you have owners that would say, no, I don't want any dogs in my house, but understand something. If that resident needs the dog for their disability, they are allowed to have that dog there. And that owner could be in fair housing situation if they do not allow it. Religious organizations can have their own communities, but it would have to be non-public. They can discriminate based on the religion, but not on any of the other protected classes. And educational institutions are also protected under, exempt under the law based on gender only. Everything else in fair housing is covered. We do remind you that when it comes to the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was published a year after the final true freeing of the slaves was noted on June 19th, 1865, does state that you cannot discriminate in housing based on race or color. So even though you may be exempt under the fair housing law, saying, oh yeah, I'm exempt, I can discriminate based on race or color. No. We can always take it back to the Civil Rights Act of 1866. I also want you to know that there has been a part of the law passed that says that you cannot have any racial harassment in your communities, that if you are aware of the racial harassments taking place in your community and you do nothing to stop it, you are just as guilty as those who are doing the actual harassment. So please remember, there are no exemptions under the 1866 law. Retaliation and restrictive covenants? No, you cannot retaliate against somebody that is exercising their right to fair housing by intimidating them, threatening them, and coercing them. And those restrictive covenants, especially in homeowners and condominiums associations, we're not talking about the restrictive covenants of the past. Those used to say things like this community is a white community. No other people can live here unless you're white. Well, that was null and void as of 1948. Now what we deal with are homeowners associations and condominium associations that have their bylaws that believe that they don't have to follow fair housing, but they do have to follow the fair housing law. And reminder, landlords, you cannot say that you have a policy that says that you will not rent to anyone with a criminal record. I'm sure that Home is going to bring you into more stuff and tell you a lot more about that, but I'm reminding you because 7 years later, we still have people that are still doing it. So I have all the information on mine, but I want home to handle that part of it for me. Appraisers, yeah, we can't forget those. If you are a person of color, know that appraisers have been discriminating for a long time. We know this, and you can go on your Google CNN housing discrimination by appraisers, and you will see so many videos. People are calling on their white friends to come over to their house, decoloring their house of any evidence that they are a family of color, only to get the right appraisal, the one they should have gotten from the beginning. So just to give you an example, this young lady here had her place. She had an appraisal done. She got two different costs, one 25,000 and the other one 10,000. Well, she got her white friend to come over, and lo and behold, $259,000 is what her house was appraised for. So sound the alarm, let your friends know. I'm doing this last one, and then I'm off of you all's case. This one here, I couldn't make it up if I even wanted to, but I have to share it with you. There's a landlord that decided that he would have a resident sign a sex contract to rent from him. There's a young lady with several children. She is Hispanic, scared because she's homeless. She has a voucher and she wants to get that house before the voucher expires. So she goes to this man, and not only did he say all this stuff, but you can read it for yourself what else he put on the contract, okay? So then he says to her, you have to sign this contract and you have to declare that you do not currently have a boyfriend, girlfriend, parent who is larger than him, because he's a little scrawny old man, okay? So what happened to him? He lost his license to real estate. He lost his license for property management, and he paid a fine of $94,000. Folks, I couldn't make it up, even if I tried. I love fair housing, though. So thank you for another year of sharing the word.
Thank you, Mally. I do appreciate you coming. You always are so knowledgeable. I had the opportunity when I first came to Hopewell in 2019 to attend one of Mally's seminars in person in Richmond. I definitely do encourage all landlords to attend one of her seminars whenever you have a chance. Also, she does yearly training for HRHA here. So if you want to attend that training, it happens around August, September, definitely reach out to me and we can have you join us for that one as well.
Hey, one thing, on the 18th of April, next month is Fair Housing Month. So April 18th, I think I'm at the Tuckahoe Library, and we'll be doing a fair housing there. And I'm encouraging, residents to come out too. But the best part of it, I'm a caterer on the side, so I got to feed my people. So I'm feeding my people. So come on out.
Yeah, good food and good knowledge.
Yeah.
Feed it.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
Nope.
Okay, I guess we'll move on. It is Home's mission to ensure equal access to housing for all people. Kalisha, and I hope I'm pronouncing these names right, Kalisha and Tanika will now expand on this mission and how you, our landlords, can assist in the achievement of this mission. So you all have the floor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kalisha Jackson. I am the Assistant Fair Housing Director. We call it Enforcement and Investigations at Home of Virginia. I am going to display my screen here. There we go. So my name is Kalisha Jackson. I work at Homewood, Virginia. I've been with Homewood, Virginia for over 5 years. I currently am the Assistant Director of Enforcement and Investigations. And my teammate, Tanika Jones, she's going to introduce herself a little later when she takes over the presentation. Just want to talk a little bit about Homewood, Virginia. So basically, our mission is to ensure equal access to housing for all people. We basically are a multifaceted nonprofit organization that is basically geared to fair housing. We have multiple different departments. Of course, we have the Fair Housing Department, where myself is, where we investigate incidences of housing discrimination. We also have a Housing Counseling and Education Department, where we are able to provide down payment assistance, foreclosure prevention, and move to opportunities for individuals who have housing choice vouchers. We also have a Housing Stability Department, where we had to definitely work with the city of Richmond for an eviction diversion program. We also were responsible for submitting payments for rent relief when that was a big issue going on in the state of Virginia. And we also have a Policy and Research Department, where we basically research systemic and historical housing discrimination. And we basically partner with the state and local government to try to push forward policy efforts. So we do a lot of different things. So my focus for this presentation and Tanika's will be source of funds protection. We decided to focus on source of funds protection. Just like Mally said, it is a newer protection, started July 1, 2020, and we are getting a lot of incidences or intakes about source of funds discrimination from individuals who are trying to rent locations with a voucher. So I want to be very specific about what do we consider source of funds according to the Virginia Fair Housing Law. Basically, it says any source that lawfully provides funds to or on the behalf of a renter or buyer of housing, including any assistance, benefits, or subsidy programs, whether such programs is administered by the governmental or non-governmental entities. So basically, this basically means all type of income that you can legally prove, payments from federal or local programs, short-term and long-term rental subsidies, housing choice vouchers, emergency assistance payments, Social Security, unemployment, alimony, child support, veteran benefits, and disability benefits. All of that are now protected under the Fair Housing Act for the state of Virginia. Just like Mally said, I'm not going to go over the exemptions. She talked about the exemptions for source of funds. But what is a housing choice voucher? I hope you guys already know what this is, but it is a federal program that assists very low income families, the elderly and the disabled to afford decent, safe, and sanitary housing in the private market. Basically, the housing subsidy is paid to the landlord directly by the PHA on behalf of the participating family. The family then pays the difference between the actual rent charged by the landlord and the amount subsidized by the program. So it's pretty easy transaction that's going on. But who can use a voucher and how are vouchers used? Well, we wanted to show the statistics in relationship to vouchers. 75% of households utilize vouchers must classify as extreme low income, meaning that their income cannot exceed 30% of the local area median income. The area median income for Richmond region is $75,126. So in order for an individual to qualify for a voucher, a household has to earn less than $22,537 annually to qualify. So let's be clear. These are individuals with extremely low income, okay? A voucher is administered at the local level through state and local housing agencies. Upon securing a voucher, a household has 60 days, usually to find some type of housing using that voucher. However, they are getting multiple extensions because it's very difficult to find housing that's within the payment standard. The whole state is having that issue. The local agency must confirm the unit meets federal housing quality standards. The household must contribute 30% of its income or a minimum of $50 for rent and utilities, and the voucher pays the rest of the cost up to a limit. we call that a payment standard. So those are the basic rules and transactions of how a housing choice voucher works in the state of Virginia. Just to give you an idea of the payment standards throughout the state of Virginia, to get an idea of what the person budget or payment limit that they can find housing with a voucher. So if an individual lives in the Richmond area, for example, and they have been approved of a 3-bedroom voucher, they cannot try to qualify for a unit that is over $1,556. So they can't even think about applying for that. That is their budget. Even in Virginia Beach, where it's much more expensive, it's near the water. If you want to get a 2-bedroom, you cannot look at a actual property or even apply for a property for a 2-bedroom in Virginia Beach. That's over $1,312 a month. So individuals who are participating in this program are on a strict payment standard or a budget. They cannot go over it. It is illegal to go over it and then think they have to pay you the difference. It doesn't work like that. They have to stay at the payment standard. So they're looking for a needle in a haystack. Let's be real. We know rent is so expensive at this point, and you are looking in Richmond for a 2-bedroom for $1,189. Good luck. Literally, good luck with finding that. You're literally looking for a needle in a haystack. And then when you layer housing discrimination on top of that, it's almost impossible for a voucher participant to find housing in the state of Virginia. So some basic information about the Virginia Federal Rental Assistance Facts. I just want to give you some facts about this program. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is the nation's largest rental assistance program, helping more than 5 million people afford private rental housing. So it's the biggest program that we have right now. In Virginia alone, approximately 204,472 people use vouchers to afford housing. So that's over 95,000 households in the state of Virginia have a voucher, okay? In Virginia, 54% of non-disabled working age Virginia households receive HUD rental assistance, included in it, at least one person works. So let's be clear, these individuals, doesn't fit the stereotype that people try to feed us that these individuals don't work. They stay at home, they eat ho-hos and popcorn, and they watch movies, and they have 6 kids, and they have a voucher, and they do nothing all day. That is a complete lie, okay? These individuals are working. Reality is, hourly income is $11 an hour in the state of Virginia. That is extremely low income. You need a voucher to survive at this point with $11 an hour with an actual income. In Virginia, rental assistance programs help 188,600 people in cities and suburbs, as well as 32,400 people in rural areas and small towns. So this program is not just in the city, in the Metro Richmond area. They're also out in rural areas too. So it's not just one concentrated area, but just know, again, we all know that it's a new protection. Just wanted to give you guys some idea of the statistics of how big this program is in the state of Virginia and how many people it is affecting negatively when you discriminate against the individual with the housing choice voucher. Most common housing choice voucher discrimination is basically denying a rental application because the applicant doesn't make 3 times the monthly rent amount. Here at Home of Virginia, we have done different investigations to see what type of discrimination our housing trust voucher participants are experiencing. When they call in to try to rent a location that's within their payment standard, a landlord is going to tell this individual, which is illegal, by the way, are saying you have to make 3 times the rent amount. It is not 3 times the rent amount of what the actual property is going to be rented as. For example, if it's $1,000 a month to rent, that individual with the voucher should not be told you have to make $3,000 a month in order to live here. That is not correct, okay? That is a huge thing that we're getting reports of that's happening to individuals with vouchers. Another common way to discriminate is accepting housing trust vouchers on the behalf of property management companies, but expressing the owner of the property doesn't accept vouchers. And this individual has more than 4 properties. So they're representing an individual who have maybe 5 or 6 properties, but they've decided that they don't want to participate in the voucher program. They want their homes not to deal with that, with kids and all of that stuff with the vouchers, just too much waiting for the inspections. They're not participating. That's illegal. If that homeowner has at least 4 properties or more, they too have to accept housing choice vouchers. You're not protected. Also, if that property management company is advertising no Section 8, no housing choice vouchers, that's a discriminatory ad at that point. You shouldn't be doing that either. So take the verbiage off the websites and the listings. It's illegal. Also, advertising housing with phrases like no Section 8. To us at home in Virginia, that's a red flag for me. Section 8 is an old term. It's almost derogatory to use. Verbiage is important. When people say words hurt. It's not Section 8. It's a housing choice voucher program. Start getting used to saying that. It's a voucher program. It is a program that working citizens of the state of Virginia are using. And we know that Section 8 has a negative stereotype attached to it. Please stop using Section 8. It's not nice. So an example of, I want to clarify this 3 times the rent amount situation that's going on with housing choice vouchers, as well as housing providers. An example, the housing provider requires all applicants to make 3 times the rent amount. Okay, the rent is $1,000 a month. The applicant's employment income is $800 per month. Okay, that applicant income is $800 a month, but the rent is $1,000 a month. The applicant is a voucher holder and he pays 30% of $800, which is $240 of their income towards the rent. The agency pays the remainder, or the $760 towards this voucher holder's rent. So the rent is $1,000. The PHA pays $760 and the client will pay the $240 because that's 30% of his income. That is how you're going to get your money, pretty much. The housing providers are subtracting the housing trust voucher portion from the total of the rent to get the tenant share of the rent. So all you're doing is, okay, well, how much do you think you're going to have to pay towards your voucher? It's a simple question. Usually people will get an idea of how much they're going to have to pay towards the rent. Well, how much are you responsible you think you're going to pay for? Oh, $240. Well, all you have to make is 3 times $240. That's the correct way. Hit that voucher holders, that participant's amount that they're paying towards the voucher is all you should be concerned about, because you're going to get the rest of your money on time, like clockwork, from the PHA. I can understand you making sure the individual has income coming in to pay their portion. That should be your only concern. Housing providers determined that the applicant meets income qualifications because the applicant income is $800. So in this case, they make $800 a month. They pay $240 towards their voucher. 3 times 240 is $720. They qualify. That's the math. That's what we should be using. Example 2. These are some examples of what landlords are doing that is incorrect. The landlord is adding the tenant's employment income to the monthly housing choice voucher fund, such as saying, okay, you make $800 a month plus the $760 that the actual PHA is going to provide. So that equals $1,560 per month. So that means you got to make $1,560 per month, or the landlord's going to decline to rent to the prospective tenant because $1,560 is not 3 times the rent amount. So they're saying, okay, well, you make $800 and then we're going to add the voucher amount that you're actually going to get towards your rent. It's $760. So you got to show me that you're making $1,560 a month. Well, if that's the case, they're not going to need a voucher. It's pretty simple. Why are they in the voucher program if they're making enough to qualify for that? But it's important to remember the method of how you calculate the income. You should only be concerned about the portion that the applicant is actually presenting towards their rent. That's the correct thing you should be looking at. All right, some recent cases that has happened in relationship to source of funds discrimination. Back in October 18th, 2021, the Attorney General's office filed 13 separate lawsuits against 29 real estate companies and housing providers for not accepting housing choice vouchers. That's one big one. And in January 2022, an agreement was reached to settle the housing discrimination lawsuits related to source of funds discrimination. Of course, they got monetary relief. They highlighted properties to home seekers via marketing campaigns that include terms like vouchers accepted instead of saying Section 8 not accepted. Now you have to advertise that vouchers are accepted. They had to implement stronger non-discriminatory policies that include source of funds, source of income funds, and ongoing fair housing training. These are the type of disciplinary actions that they had to face for violating the Fair Housing Act. One of the most recent cases is with the Equal Rights Center up in Northern Virginia. They actually sued Greystar back in September 2022, but they actually, they were going to sue them, but they decided to let's just have an agreement. Of course, they got monetary relief, and they got a lot of great things out of that agreement. The main thing is they can't use renters' credit scores if you have a housing choice voucher to determine if you qualify, because the next thing what happens with housing providers, you'll say, okay, well, your credit score has to be 670. And it's like, usually a voucher applicant or participant is not going to have a 770 credit score, 700 credit score. You know, that's not realistic. So now, and plus, if you're going to get money towards the monthly payment, the monthly rent amount from the PHA, what does the actual credit score matter? To be honest, because you're getting majority of the payment from the PHA anyway. So they were able to negotiate with Greystar that they can't even use a credit score to try to qualify an applicant who has a housing choice voucher. They can't use that against them. They also have to do compliance testing. So for like the next 3 to 5 years, they're constantly testing them, sending in testers to make sure they're abiding by the law. So they got a lot of good things out of that settlement agreement. So now I'm going to kick it over to Tanika to talk about her portion of the slide in the mobility department.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanika Jones, and as Kalisha said, I am one of her teammates here at home. I specifically work in the mobility. Well, I specifically work in the housing, counseling, and education department, but under the mobility or move to opportunity program. And our overall mission is to ensure equal access to housing for all people. But in the mobility program specifically, we're a 2-woman team, and what we do is we assist housing choice voucher participants to move to affordable neighborhoods of opportunity and low poverty. We communicate and educate all the housing providers and private landlords about the voucher program, and we service most areas. So right now we have clients in Richmond, Henrico, Chesterfield, Hopewell, Petersburg, Hanover, Chester, Colonial Heights, and Chesterfield. And we work with all PHAs and how people who service housing choice voucher holders. And we want them, the main goal is for them to be 20% or below the poverty level. However, if we can see a 10% decrease in their current poverty level, that would be also a successful move for us. Next slide. And before I go on, we are both HUD certified housing counselors. I worked for the Housing Authority, Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority for a very long time. So I'm a certified housing specialist there as well. And we are certified housing inspectors. So we try to go to the client with all of this information and assist them in advocating for themselves first. We don't want to do all the talking. And we want to teach them so they can use these things in the future and any other moves that they may have. So the common barriers that we are seeing every day, we have about, I would say about anywhere from 75 right now to 120-ish clients at a time, just because they're having the voucher for a longer period of time, just because of the way the housing market is right now. But the barriers that we're seeing are the negative perceptions people in society have towards the voucher participants. Again, Kalisha said Section 8 is a negative term. It is very derogatory. People automatically think that it's bad. And people automatically think that, you know, there's a women with children or people with children. And even if someone has 6 kids and didn't work, they still deserve to have a voucher and an affordable place to live in a good neighborhood. So it wouldn't matter, but people look at those things as derogatory. There's a lack of affordable housing. I know in the Richmond metro area, there are plenty of things going up and plenty of places, they're just not affordable. For me, and I don't have a voucher, and for anybody else, but especially voucher participants, because they're just looking for something affordable. Credit and background checks are really outrageous. You can own a home with a 670, so of course their income is the issue, but people with the new protections, the criteria has become much more stringent and they're doing different things. We've seen somebody go back for criminal background. We've seen unlawful detainers, all different kinds of things. And unlawful detainers just means that you were late on your rent or they started court proceedings. It could have even been a mistake, but it's not automatically taken off your court record, and it is public record. There are jurisdiction restrictions and policies associated with the voucher program. Specifically, Richmond Redevelopment just had to restrict their jurisdiction to Richmond only for their voucher participants, depending on if they're off the waiting list or if they have a voucher. That has made it very, very difficult for housing choice voucher holders to find housing. Richmond has become very difficult to find affordable housing. And we want those restrictions to be lifted, to be honest with you, because it gives them a fair shot. And a lot of areas outside of the Richmond area that you can find high opportunity. And some people just work in different areas. We want all of those things to come into play. The landlords and participants lack the knowledge about the Housing Choice Voucher Program. They do lack the knowledge, although I will be honest with you, we are trained. I just came from a training last week. Property managers and landlords should be held to the same standard, and they should be trained on what's going on, but they don't know. And sometimes that's why we talk with them and we reach out so we can give them the information, and the next person that comes to them, they can, do things a little bit different. Voucher participants have behavioral health challenges. Health equity is a big thing. When you don't have a home, it affects everything, mentally, physically, all of those things happen, and it trickles down from whoever the head of household is to the children, and it's something that definitely continues. So we want to make sure that, they find housing, because once you have housing, it just sets everything else in place. And there's increased gentrification. For instance, I live in Richmond City. When I moved into my dwelling, I'm a renter too. The poverty rate was 33.4 or something like that. And I've been living there for almost 4 years at this point. Gentrification, we have a ice cream shop, we have a cycle studio, we have a pet groomer, and now it is 13%. So those things change very quickly depending on who's moving into the area, and those resources for those areas change too, but you're moving people who really need it out of those neighborhoods. Next slide. And I know I'm going fast, but we're trying to make sure we are timely. So we want to humanize all housing choice voucher participants. It is common in the mobility department for us to contact landlords directly, and we want to give them an idea of who people are. We definitely want to make sure they understand that, like Kalisha said, people work every day. Sometimes housing choice voucher participants have disabilities that are physical and or mental and not seen, and they won't understand it. So it's very important for them to understand that they are people. And we want to have difficult conversations with family, friends, and associates and coworkers alike to help them understand who these housing choice voucher participants are. I have friends and family that don't understand what I do, and I'm not the best happy hour person to go to happy hour if you start talking about housing choice voucher participants or you don't understand it, because I'm going to let you know exactly They're just like everyone else. There's no difference. I don't even say regular renters. Everybody's a regular renter. The only difference is they have a third party assisting them with the rent. And it's everyone. People are not employed, disabled, elderly. Even if somebody has kids and they're not working and they're able to work, sometimes the childcare expense is too much. Sometimes they can't get home in time to get their kids off the bus. You have to consider all of these things when you're discussing the program. Next slide. Now, ways to overcome the voucher barriers are to make no limit on the number of voucher extensions a PHA can approve. I know I used to work for the Housing Authority. It sounds lofty, but right now with the housing market, it is definitely very, very hard to find housing. So our local and the one who feeds us the most, it's about 120 days and they can get 2 extensions right now, which is fair to some, but it's just taking much longer to find housing at this point. We want to continue to educate housing providers and voucher participants about SOI protections and rights. We feel like if a tenant or a housing choice voucher participant knows their rights when they walk into an office, they can advocate for themselves and nobody can tell them anything different, including whoever their housing specialist is or a potential landlord or property manager. We want to provide landlords with financial incentive programs to encourage participation in the program. That would be deposit assistance. In some cases, if something happens with their property, which is very rare, even though some people think that housing choice voucher holders tear up property, but even if it did happen in those rare situations, they were compensated in some kind of way for that. We want to opt in for payment standards that will increase subsidies in high rent and high opportunity areas. The paper standards really need to go up as far as the housing market is going up. So that is something that we want to try to encourage as well. We want to require all PHAs to participate in small area fair market rent. That is something that PHAs sometimes have an issue with, but it would help housing choice voucher participants so much. It just makes so much sense and it's a very simple concept, but it does get kind of complicated when you start looking at everything that goes into it. I hope it can happen very, very soon. We want to advocate for laws and policies that support renters and housing choice voucher participants. Renters and housing choice voucher participants are low on the totem pole. We want them to be able to live in diverse neighborhoods and beside people who make 100,000 as opposed to their 25,000, because everybody deserves to live in good neighborhoods, have access to good schools, and feel safe in their home. We want to learn the local and state officials' housing views and execute our right to vote. We want to know how each official feels about the housing rights, and specifically for us housing choice voucher holders, so we can make it known and then suggest that our clients go out and vote for people who align with making the housing choice voucher program just something that's much easier to navigate. And like we're doing now, we want to have open conversations with family, friends, associates, co-workers about how the voucher program works. And we want to eliminate the negative perceptions that people have had for so many years. The ones that are most affected are unfortunately African-American women with children. And we really, really, really want these negative perceptions to actually be a thing of the past. And that's what Kalisha and I work very hard to do. We didn't know if anybody had any questions or anything that they want to ask. These are our references and the things that we use. If anybody wanted to reach out to me, you can definitely reach out and have a conversation. This is our email address, or call the main number and just ask for us too. My co-worker and colleague, Brigitte Cordes, is also a mobility specialist, and you can reach out to her as well. But I guess we would open it up to any questions if anyone had any. Kalisha, we moved through that pretty fast.
We did.
I tell you, Tanika, I have a question from housing specialist perspective. So I know you started talking about the small area market rent. And I'll tell you, my hesitancy with using it is that from my understanding is that once you start using it, you're not allowed to then revert back to using HUD fair market in the future. So it's kind of like if you start using it, maybe it sounds like you're being put into a box.
Well, I mean, even, I don't know for certain, it's something that I have to look out to see if you couldn't go back. But even if you were put into that box, the small area market rents are what the rents are going for in that area. It's like the basis right now in Richmond. It's I've just looked, and we do searches every day, all day. 1 bedroom is going anywhere from about $1,800 to about $2,000. But the payment standard, at least for Richmond redevelopment, is $1,183, I believe. So and if they find anything anywhere else, it's subpar conditions. The landlords are sometimes what's the word I'm looking for? Slum landlords. And so I do understand that it might be a challenge for the PHA, but we want to go into the area where it's equity. So if the rent is going up and the small area market rent is something, you wouldn't need to fall back on her. HUD should be at the same level as well.
Right. Okay. And I do want to reiterate another point that both of you made. You know, people just love, well, maybe it's just not really love, but they used to calling the program Section 8. And we really should be transitioning our language to housing choice voucher, because we know that Section 8 does have a stigma with it. And that understanding that housing choice voucher, just the wording in itself, provides a different level of doesn't sound so discriminatory.
It gives them some dignity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just that, that negative stigma with Section 8 comes from a lot of different things. Like, think about the movies and TV shows that we watch.
Yeah.
It may be in the projects, and they be like, you on Section 8, like or something, like, and we're not even noticing that we're being conditioned to have that implicit bias, just like Nally was talking about. In addition, think about the music we may listen to, especially if you're into rap or R&B music. They'll talk negatively about Section 8. We just have this perception that it's bad. We've been conditioned that way. So that's why I think verbiage is extremely important to change the narrative.
Yeah.
Even the projects piece of it, it should just really be public housing.
Public housing
Is what it is. Yeah.
Actually, it shouldn't be anything.
Yeah, it should just
You're right. You're right.
It should just be housing. There's one thing that I wanted to bring up while I have you ladies too. One of the things that I notice is everywhere I go in Richmond, there's new construction. But why is it mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms? Isn't that a disparate impact on the community?
It's definitely a disparate impact on familiar status. But one thing I noticed, I saw on the news like 2 days ago, apartment sizes are shrinking all over the nation.
Yes.
And it's because there's more people in the world, but it's weird. They're condensing all this housing in metropolitan areas, and it's shrinking. They're not creating 3 bedrooms anymore, and a 1 bedroom is under 500 square feet. So it's like they're just condensing the space and making it even harder for individuals with children. It's sickening. Not only that, you have to think about how it negatively affects people with disabilities as well.
Exactly.
Places are not up to ADA standards, like just for a person with a wheelchair to get into the hallway. So all of those things people are not thinking about when they're constructing these units, and it's definitely a disparate impact on familiar status, 100%.
Even the way that you apply for these programs, some people just don't comprehend on the same level as others. And sometimes, everything is online, and I have elderly clients and young clients alike. It's like they're designing everything to be harder for everyone, but still averaging in the Richmond area 1,300 evictions a month at this point. So, I think it's all by design, but like Kalisha and I, when we were cutting down this presentation, we could talk about this all day. DeAndre could have told us to talk about it for a couple of hours, and we could have. It's by design, I think. I think the haves don't care about the have-nots at all.
It was by design from the very
From
beginning.
the very beginning, yep.
From the minute they made RACE the biggest point here, it was a problem.
It was a problem.
Period.
Yeah.
And they knew they were successful. They were
Yes.
successful, and they see their success every single day.
They just changed the rules. The rules are changed.
Yes.
And once we
Yes.
learn how to play that game, the rules are switched and changed, and you have no idea about the policies that being put in place, and they find passive ways, property management companies to elude accepting housing choice vouchers. One of the newest things I've heard are we don't have 12-month leases. We only have 10-month leases. And we know if you have a housing choice voucher, you have to be somewhere for a year.
At least a year.
10-month leases, so we can't accept vouchers. And they knew it because they said, we recently spoke to the PHA and we had a training, and they told us that they had to have a year lease. So we only have 10 months leases.
Man.
Mhm.
But they learned that little bit, but they don't know about disparate impact. So even if they make it neutral, we're gonna get them.
We're going to get them.
And that's the thing that kills me. Why are people not sleeping at night and thinking of ways to keep other people out of homes? These people have children. These
Yep.
children are the future leaders of this country. What's going to happen when we are old and they take over?
Exactly.
Do these people not think about that?
Exactly.
They even have the PHAs. Everybody's doing the same job, and they have them fighting with each other, jurisdiction issue, and not the flow of information not going well. And like you said, it was created from the beginning to do that. And with the jurisdiction things that are going on, it almost seems like, and I have to use my words very carefully, like some localities don't want some people in those localities or certain people in the localities, so they made decisions that kept people out of their areas. And it's very difficult being a mobility counselor and you saying that they're restricted to Richmond only, but still saying that our program wants you to have high opportunity.
Exactly.
It's
Choice.
very difficult.
Choice.
Yes.
Our program wants you to have choice. And choice is something that a lot of people don't want other people to have.
Right.
Well, I'll just say that here in Hopewell, we are looking to do some new construction. We've already started we've already renovated one of our public housing units into PBV, same unit sizes from 1 up to 4. And we're looking to build another 64 unit building. It's gonna be 4 floors, and it's gonna have 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, as well as looking to transition the rest of our public housing properties into PBV, RAD PBV units. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We're trying to give low income families what they deserve.
Better choices.
Yep.
What better choices?
Yep.
Yep.
Ladies, I don't know if y'all seen my schedule on our website, but one of the things that I have planned for this year, and I'm going to partner with you all and work with, is public housing training.
We were just talking about that. We were literally just talking about that, Tanika and I, how we wanted to do that.
Yeah, I had planned it for April, but I don't want to. April is just such a crazy month.
It's a crazy month.
I think I want to go into either May or June. And because a lot of what we see too is that public housing doesn't talk to fair housing. So people they get told to do things that is absolutely illegal under the law.
Absolutely illegal.
Yes.
I have a lot of public housing residents that get vouchers, and when they're telling their story, because we want them to be able to tell us what's going on as they're coming out, I hear some of the things, and I'm
You're in shock.
I have to let them advocate for themselves, because ultimately, no matter who our partners are, I want those people to know their rights and advocate for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
So
just let us know.
yeah, we have a lunch date.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you so
are
much
there,
for inviting us too. We appreciate it.
you're
Thank you.
welcome. Are there any more questions for Kalisha and Tanika?
Where are the people that we're talking to? Why aren't they asking questions? Fair housing is so complex. It's not black and white. And I have heard no questions from anyone. That's shocking, folks.
I see our attendees here, but maybe they're shy, or maybe you're answering all their questions.
Okay, we're good, girls. Queens, we are awesome queens.
Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Hi. This is
yes.
Gail. I'm with Century 21 Colonial Realty.
Mhm.
We don't have any way to chat with you. There's no chat box. There's no chat box or any way to set it up from what we're looking at.
Yeah, there is no chat box, but I did see there was no chat box. But if you want to just come off of mute, you can ask questions.
Mhm.
Just come off of mute then? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is really
You're welcome.
informal. So you want to have a question, you can just go and ask.
Not yet. Not yet. Give us time.
Okay. Okay, well, we're gonna move forward with our presentation. HRHA uses affordablehousing.com as a central area to send all of our applicants and participants to when they are searching for housing. Likewise, we encourage you, our landlords, to list all your upcoming units on this site for ease of visibility. Elizabeth will now show you the ins and outs of the website. Elizabeth, are you here with us? Don't see her. Elizabeth, are you here? Don't see her. She hasn't emailed me. We'll just keep going and maybe she'll come a little later.
Yeah, I was about to say, you told me to get on about 11:15. So if you told her, maybe 11:45, she might not be on yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you're here, Killing, because we're going to move forward with you.
Alrighty.
Participants of our program can seek legal counsel through the Central Virginia Legal Aid Society. This affords them the opportunity to possess legal advice and support for all their housing needs. Caitlin will provide us with current and future Virginia laws as it pertains to housing. Caitlin, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Woodcock. I'm actually with the Legal Aid Justice Center. So there's two legal aids operating in the same space. Central Virginia Legal Aid is primarily like private landlord tenant relationships. So they're always a good resource. We do more of the public housing, but we also do like your housing choice voucher cases and such as well. So that's where CVS and LAJC overlap. So we're also a good resource for tenants and such. But so I have a PowerPoint if you would, if I see I can share, so hopefully I can actually share me, make sure I can get I know, Kat, you want to play. It's not playtime. Let's see. And just present the PowerPoint would be question one. From beginning. Nope, I had to do that later. And so at least I have that. Sorry, I'm a little tech not enabled. Let's see. All right, can y'all see my screen now?
Yes, we sure can.
Perfect. All right, so I did this primarily from the focus of the Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act. And I say that because there are federal rules that guide certain things. So it's always good if you as a landlord have questions or are thinking that your tenant has done something wrong or something like that, to consult with an attorney, because there are federal and state overlaps sometimes, or sometimes where a federal rule is existing where the state rules don't match it for whatever reason. So it's always good to talk to an attorney before you are thinking of doing something specific. And also talking to the housing authority, because they may have things that you as a landlord need to do that under Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act, you may not need to. So I limited it to a particular scope, which is the VRLTA, Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act. Just as kind of the disclaimer, because have to, my views are my own, they're not my organization's. And nothing I'm saying today is creating a client attorney relationship with any of you today. All right. So just kind of table of contents to kind of get us where we're going, to kind of do the roadmap, if you will. Terms of conditions of rental agreements, a little blurb on an important little notice rule, security deposits, repairs, and please note there are a lot of code sections that involve maintenance and repair. There's certain provisions about providing like peepholes and locks, things like that. There's provisions on how to specifically remediate mold, things like that. I didn't get into every single minutia because I was told, 15, 20 minutes. And if I got into every single minutia, we would be here for quite a long time. And so then moving forward, talking about eviction, and then again, it's not an exhaustive list of every single statute that involves eviction, but it gives you a good roadmap at least. And sorry if I sound a little funky, I have a cold, so I sound a little funky today. So terms and conditions of rental agreements. First, written leases. I'm 99% sure Hopeful Redevelopment requires this, but the state law also requires it. In the lease, the terms and conditions of the contract, because that's what a lease is, need to be specified. The statement of tenant rights and responsibilities that is created by the Department of Housing and Community Development needs to also be provided and signed by both parties. It's on their website, and that's actually very specific to the code. So you can't just copy and paste certain sections into your lease and say it was done. No, you have to use the actual form that DHCD has created. Again, I just make the note of speak to Hopewell Redevelopment Housing Authority about terms it may require be in the lease, because it may have its own particular rules that they want you to have within the lease. A common example among housing authorities is that the initial lease term needs to be for a year. So it's a common example of what may not be required by state law, but may be required by either the housing authority or by federal law. Just kind of blanket statement, no one can just up and change a contract, generally speaking, and without getting consent from both parties. That's true in a lease as well. Neither you nor your tenant can just change the lease. You have to provide notice per the lease terms, and both parties have to agree. And that's for major things about the lease. Like you can't just up and change the rent or up and change when the lease ends and things like that without everyone agreeing. Late fees can only be collected if they're provided for in the lease. So if you don't put it in there, you can't have them. And late fees are capped at the lesser of 10% of the periodic rent owed, or 10% of the amount that's actually owed by the tenant, whichever is less. So I provided a couple examples. If the tenant's portion of the monthly rent is $700 and the tenant didn't pay this month, their late fee can be no higher than $70. Likewise, if the rent is $700 and they paid $500, then the late fee can be no higher than $20, because $20 would be 10% of that remaining $200. And again, that's their portion of the rent. They are not responsible for the percent that the housing authority pays, whatever that percentage is, whether that's 20% or more of your total. So like if your actual rent is like $1,100, the tenant's not responsible for that full amount. They're only responsible for their portion, and that includes for their late fees. Receipts and accounting statements, ledgers, they're all kind of the same term, or they're all different terms for the same thing. But if a tenant requests in writing a written statement of the charges and payments for their tenancy, a landlord's required to give it to them within 10 business days. And the statement needs to be for the last 12 months or for the length of the tenancy, whichever is shorter. So if they've only been there 5 months, then it's only a 5-month statement. If they've been there for 5 years, it's only for the past 12 months. Also with receipts, if a tenant pays with cash or money order and requests a receipt, they have to be able to give, the landlord does have to give that. And just an important rule on notice, and sometimes within my presentation, I just quote the statute because sometimes they say it just as effectively as I can or just as nicely. But so if a tenancy is subject to a housing choice voucher program or any other federal, state, or local program, then there has to be notice of the statewide legal aid phone number and website. Then that is distinguished from like Legal Aid Justice Center's contact information or Central Virginia Legal Aid or any other local legal aid. It's the statewide legal aid phone number and website. That's actually different from the housing authority itself. For public housing, they're required to provide the contact information for the local legal aid. So that's unique to a private landlord who's participating in these programs. So kind of moving towards security deposits. This is an area I get a ton of questions about from tenants. So I thought it was important to present to landlords as well. Security deposits are capped at 2 months periodic rent. So where there's been situations like that I've seen previously where a landlord did like 3 or 4 months rent, that sort of thing. That's not allowed. It's 2 months periodic rent. And when I talk about applying the security deposit, that I'm talking about what happens generally at the end of the lease. There are certain situations where a landlord can deduct from the security deposit while the tenancy is alive, but it's a very like kind of niche thing. So again, it's something to talk to an attorney about before doing if you're not sure. And I did provide the relevant statutes in my presentation, which I can email to DeAndre if he would like, and he can distribute. So you can look at that code for yourself. But so a landlord may apply the tenant security deposit to the payment of accrued rent, including reasonable charges for late payments, payment of damages, reasonable wear and tear, and other damages or charges as provided in the rental agreement. And again, this is at the end of the lease term when the lease terminates or the tenant vacates, whichever is later. If the tenant provides a forwarding address, the landlord is required to send to the tenant the deposit and or the itemized statement of the damages, deductions, and charges within 45 days of the termination or date tenant vacated, whichever is later. I said and or because there are situations where, like say the security deposit was $2,000, maybe only $1,000 was taken out for certain things. You would send their portion of the security deposit back along with the itemized statement of why they didn't get their full money, versus if they get their full money, you don't need to send an itemized statement because no money was taken out. Likewise, if all of their money was taken out, then the itemized statement. That's why I wrote and or there. If no forwarding address is provided, because I get this question as well. Again, I just got it from the code because that was a little easiest at this situation. But so if the tenant fails to provide that forwarding address for the landlord to return the security deposit upon 1 year, then the landlord may submit that sum to the state treasurer as unclaimed property, and they have a process for doing that. And if the landlord or managing agent is a real estate licensee, you would comply with this 54.12108, which is corresponding to regulations of the real estate board for doing that for the security deposit. Insurance instead of security deposits. This is something I actually haven't seen very much of. And so that's actually the reason why I copy pasted the statute on it, because it's something I've seen very little of, because it's not something that's widely available in Virginia yet, but it is permitted. But so the landlord may permit a tenant to provide the damage insurance in lieu of the security deposit. That part's important because that's the part I've seen that a tenant does both, and that's not the case. It's one or the other. So there's the different criterion for this damage insurance. So it's the State Corporation Commission. It's a company that's that's permitted to operate in Virginia. The coverage is effective of the payment of the premium of the first premium and remains effective for the entire lease, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Something important to note is that the tenant initially opts out and does the damage insurance, they can change their minds and they don't need the landlord's consent to do that. They can just change their minds. With that said, they have to pay the full security deposit if they choose to change their minds. A move-out inspection, if a landlord requests the tenant vacate, or if the tenant tells the landlord that, hey, they want to move out within 5 days of the tenant telling them they want to move out. So either the landlord requests the tenant leave, or they find out that the tenant is going to move out within 5 days of that date. The landlord is required to provide written notice of the tenant's right to be present for the inspection of the property. That inspection to take place to determine how much of the security deposit is going to be returned to the tenant. So the landlord provides a notice of their right to be present. When the tenant receives that notice, if they want to be present, they need to let the landlord know that in writing. When the landlord receives the tenant's notice that they want to be present, then the landlord needs to notify the tenant of the date and time of the inspection, which needs to occur within 72 hours of delivery of possession, meaning when the tenant, within 72 hours of the tenant giving the property back to the landlord. Repairs. Landlord's obligations, I kind of condensed this. They are a bit lengthy, and that's also why I put the code sections at the beginning in the table of contents for everyone. So landlords must comply with applicable housing and building codes that affect health and safety, that materially affect. So common areas and multi-family properties also need to be kept safe and clean. Landlords have to make all repairs to keep the property fit and habitable. And this one I put in quotes because it's a little lengthy, but it's important. Keeping safe and good working order, electrical, plumbing, sanitary, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and other facilities and appliances, elevators, etc., that are supplied or required to be supplied by the landlord. So if the landlord doesn't provide, run a certain plumbing and it's required by law, the landlord needs to supply it and keep it current. Current as in working. Maintaining the property in a way to prevent moisture and mold growth. And that includes promptly responding to notices from the tenant and the prompt remediation of mold. I did not put in the whole code section for remediating mold. It is its own little caveat in the world. And with mold remediation, it's not just painting the mold over the mold. I've seen that a lot, and that's not effective. There's actually very specific rules for treating mold. And so I would encourage anyone who has that situation to look at the statute and maybe consult with an attorney. Providing and maintaining garbage and other debris receptacles and arrange for their removal. So providing the big trash, the big trash compactor things outside of the multi-unit complex, that's what that's talking about. Supplying running water and reasonable amounts of hot water at all times. And if you provide air conditioning, you have to maintain it. If you don't provide air conditioning, then you don't have to maintain it. That's the one, air conditioning is the one that a landlord isn't obligated to provide, but if a landlord does provide it, it needs to be kept in working order. And this one I also put in just quotes because it was easiest today, but providing a certificate to the tenant that all smoke alarms that are present have been inspected and in our good working order. So there are certain of these different ones that the landlord and the tenant can agree for the tenant to be responsible for, but that's part of why I always say talk to an attorney that you are specifically reaching out to say, hey, what can I get the tenant to do and what do I have to do and I can't push on them. And that's something that the landlord and the tenant do actually have to agree to. So landlord can't just decide that the tenant is going to be responsible for A, B, C, D. That has to be an agreement. Access and temporary relocation of tenant for repairs. This is something I see all the time. So if there's an emergency, the landlord can enter the unit without consent. The landlord can also enter without giving prior notice if the tenant has already requested the repair. Otherwise, the landlord shall give the tenant notice of their intent to enter and may only enter at reasonable times. And then unless it's impractical to do so, the landlord shall give the tenant at least 72 hours of notice of routine maintenance that needs to be performed. And the reasonable times comes up a lot more often than it should. I've heard way too many situations of the landlord shows up at 11 o'clock at night, things like that. And the tenant's like, wait a minute, why are you coming to my house at like in the middle of the night? That's not okay. So coming within reasonable amount of time, like coming at a reasonable time and with reasonable notice, at least 72 hours is what the law states. Again, that's not in the situation of an emergency, and that's also not the situation if the tenant makes the request for the repair. So if the tenant gives written notice or calls or what have you, then hey, insert repair, the landlord doesn't have to give 72 hours of notice of when they're going to show up. So getting into relocation, because this comes up a lot as well. Upon the sole determination of the landlord that a non-emergency condition exists that requires the tenant to temporarily relocate, for the landlord to fix the problem, the landlord may, upon at least 30 days written notice to the tenant, require the tenant to temporarily vacate the dwelling unit for a period not to exceed 30 days to a comparable dwelling unit or hotel as selected by the landlord and at no expense or cost to the tenant. The landlord's not required to pay for other expenses for the temporary location period, like getting new food, things like that. But the landlord is required to provide the new hotel or dwelling unit for that for 30 days without cost to the tenant. It's basically their rent goes to paying to live elsewhere during that period. Getting into eviction, the really, really no fun part, but it's the part that unfortunately we see all the time, at least at legal aid. And it's, like there's going to be reasons why you may want to evict a tenant. And that's reality, that's life. So talking about it is important, especially because it's better, it's better for everyone if it's done correctly. It's better for the landlord, it's better for the tenant. It's just better done for everybody if it's done according to the law. So talking first about remediable violations, things that can be fixed other than non-payment of rent, because non-payment of rent has its own rules. So if it's something that can be fixed, the landlord has to provide notice of what happened, like what's wrong. Not just, hey, you violated X lease section. You need to say why, like what the tenant did to violate the lease, and gives the tenant 21 days to fix the situation. In that same notice, the landlord also is informing the tenant that if the issue isn't fixed within the 21 days, the lease will terminate 30 days from the notice date. So you don't have to provide a second notice saying, hey, your lease is going to terminate now or within 30, like after that 30 days. It's one notice does both. It says 21 days. If 21 days doesn't happen, 30 days. If the violation is fixed within the 21 days, the lease doesn't terminate. That said, if the violation is fixed and then 2 months down the line, the issue happens again, the landlord isn't necessarily obligated to give more time to fix it. They can just give notice of, hey, you're continuing to violate our lease. You need to go. But at this point, it's not remediable. Again, I always say, like, particularly if you're doing like housing choice voucher program or another federal state program, talk to the housing authority about what they require, because it may be different. And I also say talk to an attorney, again, just making sure you're not violating particular rules, that there may be federal rules that aren't within the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. Non-remediable violations. These are things that can't be fixed. For violations that are not criminal, and that are criminal also being that are a threat to health and safety, the landlord has to provide 30 days notice to the tenant. So for criminal, I didn't want to get too into the weeds with you all, but it's basically these criminal acts, drugs, things like that, that pose a threat to the health and safety of the landlord, other tenants, etc. So those situations, not 30 days notice, the landlord can terminate the lease immediately and proceed to file an unlawful eviction case and move forward with having them removed from the court. And there's very specific rules as to how quickly that hearing has to happen for those criminal act type situations. But generally for the not criminal, it's provide the 30 days notice. If the tenant doesn't then vacate, then filing the unlawful detainer in court to have them evicted. Non-payment of rent. So if rent is unpaid when due and the tenant fails to pay the rent within 5 days after notice is served on him, notifying him of his non-payment and the landlord's intention to terminate the rental agreement. If the rent is not paid, then the landlord may terminate and proceed to obtain possession of the premises. That is a little bit verby. Basically, if the tenant doesn't pay their rent on time, once it's late, so for a typical lease, and for every lease, they have their own rules, right? You can say, hey, rent is due on the 1st. If it's not paid on the 1st, it's considered late. But for a typical lease, day 1, they give 5 days. After day 5, it's considered late at that point, and then the landlord serves the written notice giving 5 days to pay. That's how it typically works, but the landlord and tenant within the lease can have their own timeline there. But so if it's late, 5 days notice, and then if it's not paid in that 5 days, landlord can file the court case, the summons for unlawful detainer. I also added the note for right of redemption, that if the tenant pays all amounts owed prior to the court date, then the case has to be dismissed. Likewise, if the tenant didn't pay, judgments happened, and now we're getting to the actual writ of eviction time. If the tenant pays everything owed at least 48 hours before the sheriff scheduled eviction, so that's when the sheriff has put the writ of eviction on the door with the date and time. They gave at least 72 hours because they're required to. If the tenant pays everything owed within 48 hours of that sheriff scheduled eviction time, the eviction has to be canceled. Also, as a little side note, the landlord needs to let the court know and actually file the notice of satisfaction that the tenant has paid everything owed. And if a landlord does not, tenant can file against them to recover and all that. So it's important to go ahead and take care of that. Transitioning to unlawful evictions, which are covered by a different code section than lawful evictions. And this one is 55.1-1243.1, and I believe I put it in the table of contents. Want to talk about this because if a landlord has if right of redemption happens, say the tenant pays everything owed within 48 hours of the scheduled eviction, and the landlord doesn't cancel the eviction, they are subject to this unlawful eviction statute. So that's why it was the segue. So grounds for an unlawful eviction are removing or excluding the tenant from the dwelling unit unlawfully, interrupting or causing the interruption of an essential service. This is hot water, this is heat, this is plumbing. These are the essential services required for someone to live at the property or take an action to make the premises unsafe for habitation. That last one is very, different courts look at this a little differently in terms of what is willful, things like that. But say because it's difficult because what one person views as being a willful act to make the premises unsafe is not the same as what someone else may view that as. I'm trying to come up with a clear example. This is going to be an extreme example because it's the only one I can come up with off the top of my head, but poisons the water. That's incredibly unsafe for habitation. Maybe something like introducing a bunch of rodents to the house or something like that, something that's just very outside. That I'm trying to think of ones that wouldn't be subject to a debate on whether that was a willful action. But so the remedy, if that situation occurs, that either the landlord unlawfully removed the tenant or caused the interruption of an essential service or took action to make the place unsafe. If the tenant proves that in court, the tenant can recover their actual damages. Actual damages can be things from property lost when they had to immediately vacate and couldn't take all their belongings with them and the belongings were destroyed or whatever. Or their hotel costs for living in a hotel, things like that. Statutory damages, which are either $5,000 or 4 months rent, whichever is more, and their attorney's fees. And that's especially important as like even as a legal aid attorney, because attorney's fees can be gotten even if someone used a legal aid attorney and didn't actually have to pay the lawyer. That's prescribed by case law, things like that. But attorney's fees, if they hire a private attorney or legal aid, just realistically, no attorney is cheap, at least in terms of their fees when they can be generated. So it can make, sorry about the background noise there. I'm in my office, which also serves as my cat's space. So sorry about the background noise for a sec. But so it can make, the attorney's fees can make any judgment go from a little smaller to, so it's particularly important to note. And that's actually the end of the presentation. Again, I tried to condense this into something that would be 15-20 minutes. So was trying to make it a little more manageable for everyone today. There's certainly more information I can talk about, like example, the right of reservation that landlords have within 55.1-1250. If a landlord provides very specific, it gets actually in quotes in the statute language to the tenant, about like for a non-payment case, then if the tenant makes a partial payment, then the landlord can proceed with eviction, even though the tenant made a partial payment. If the landlord doesn't provide that, like in quotes, statutory language, then a partial eviction, a partial payment would stop an eviction, as an example. So I encourage anyone, landlord, tenant alike, that if you have a problem, talk to an attorney who can look at your specific situation and tell you what law is applicable or what laws are applicable, because oftentimes there's a bunch of them, and can move forward, and you can move forward that way. But again, that's it for my presentation. I hope this was helpful, at least as a good like primer on Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Hi, Caitlin.
Yes.
My name is Shayna Story. I'm down in Hopewell. I'm with Parr and Abernathy Realty. I stepped away from my desk for about 3 minutes while you were in your presentation. So if you covered this, I apologize.
Okay.
I wanted to know if you could briefly touch on the right of redemption.
Yes.
Portion,
So
please.
I very briefly went over it.
I'm
and-
sorry.
No, it's okay. But so I'm happy to go over it again. Right of redemption. If a tenant pays all amounts owed as like at the court date, then the case has to be dismissed. For after court situations, so judgment's already been gotten, writ of eviction is happening, that situation. If the tenant pays everything owed at least 48 hours before the sheriff scheduled eviction, so to like 48 hours, the sheriff has to give 72 hours notice of their eviction date, the date that they're coming and actually removing the tenant. So within 48 hours of that date, if the tenant pays everything owed, then the eviction has to be canceled by the landlord. Because if the landlord doesn't, then the landlord is subject to the unlawful eviction statute, which is no fun.
Right.
And also furthermore, I just kind of added the caveat that if a tenant redeems, or not a caveat, but I added the little additional nugget of information that if the tenant pays everything owed, then the landlord needs to let the court know that the judgment has been satisfied. Because if they don't, then they can be open to a tenant filing a motion against them for not having marked it satisfied,
right.
and all that.
I appreciate that. A lot of folks don't know that the right of redemption is as many times as necessary in a 12-month period, no longer just once a month. I mean, once a year. So I apologize for asking you to rehash that out. So thank you.
You're welcome. And that is true. There's one exception to that. And it's if a landlord owns fewer than 5 properties, I believe, then it's once a year. But for larger landlords like yourself that manage a lot of properties, then you're correct that the tenant isn't limited in their ability to redeem. And as this has not much to do with right of redemption, but the laws do change every year. I focused on the law as it is now, and the laws that I specifically pointed out, I don't believe are changing in July, but I know there's a provision that's changing about security deposits when they can be deducted from during the lease period in terms of notice and such. I didn't specifically go over that, but come July, the notice period is changing for that. Landlord tenant law didn't change all that much this year. But that's one thing that is changing, the notice period, if the security deposit is going to be deducted during the tenancy. So I encourage everyone that's in this business of being a landlord to stay abreast and just keep up with these law changes. And I know that's very difficult. That's also why I always advise people to talk to a lawyer. That is our business, is making sure we know what the law is. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah.
And again, I'll send this PowerPoint to DeAndre so he can share it with you all. So that way y'all can have it as kind of like a reference point. And again, I state that I represent, like my views are my own, but then I'm also not creating an attorney-client relationship by stating the law. But so again, y'all can look at this as kind of a reference point when y'all are working with tenants that from like from Hopewell redevelopment. And I'll just say I'm really appreciative that you all are taking the time to learn about the law and such, and that y'all are working with Hopewell redevelopment, and y'all aren't people that we're having to fight to say, hey, you can't discriminate against people who want to use their voucher here. So I appreciate that y'all are proactively renting to people with vouchers and other like federal subsidies, and want to know what you should and shouldn't be doing and such like that. So I really appreciate that.
Caitlin, can I ask you one more question? You said at the beginning of your presentation, and this is something that it looks like we might be doing slightly incorrectly. We changed back our late notices do have a legal aid contact information with the website, but we've been posting the Central Virginia Legal Aid Society and their website and their telephone number. And you indicated that we need to have the statewide legal aid telephone number and website.
That's correct.
And that is the Legal Aid Justice Center where you come out of?
No.
Okay.
I'll find it real quick. I didn't grab it earlier, but I'll grab it real quick. Let's see if I can use my Google now.
I've tried to Google it. I'm just not sure if it's.
Let's see. That's not what I was looking for. So let's see if I can get to chat. Yeah. Or chat's disabled. Never mind. But so it's valegalaid.org is the statewide legal aid website. And it's maintained by the Virginia Poverty Law Center, but you would go to valegalaid.org. And that is, okay, that's the eviction helpline. The general phone number is 1-866 LEGLAID.
Okay.
Like 1-866 LEGLAID is the legal aid phone number for the statewide.
Perfect.
Yeah,
And then,
I know it gets so
do we need to have the mailing address as well, or just the name, telephone number, and website?
Name, telephone number, and website per the code. If you like, actually, is there even a mailing address on this website? Good question. There is not a mailing address on their website anyway, at least not immediately available.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. You always learn something new every day, so I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Like I'm going to stop share, but Absolutely. And that's the beauty of doing presentations and such, is helping people learn and all that good stuff. Yeah, public housing is the entity that has to provide the local legal aid contact information. You all, as working with housing choice vouchers, voucher recipients and such, use the statewide legal aid.
Are there any more questions for Ms. Caitlin? It's not. Caitlin, I do thank you for joining us this morning. It's been very informative to me. It is my hope that next year we can kind of go back in person and do provide longer periods for you and all of our presenters. So we'll definitely be in touch about what we can do for next year.
Sounds good. And I'd say, just talking to you, I'd say keep CVS in the loop, because sometimes they're a little busier than me, because they deal with more of the private landlord tenants. So their case volumes are just higher by nature, but they may be interested as well in the future, just maybe not this year, just because they were probably inundated. As you all may know, eviction numbers are very much on the rise. So they are very overwhelmed right now. I'm glad I deal with more of a subset of eviction issues rather than all.
Man, yeah, that sounds like a blessing.
But again, thank you, DeAndre, and Hopewell Redevelopment, and you all for taking the time to learn more about being good landlords. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to hop off of here now, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, everyone. I don't think Elizabeth has showed up. So I will begin my portion of today's presentation. And I'm going to focus on four areas that here at Hopewell, we want to make sure we're stressing that these procedures and processes are being done properly. We're going to be looking at today the rafter package, which is the landlord package, need to be completed in order to do the lease process, rental increases, HQS inspections, and we're going to take a kind of an overview of our new landlord portal that we started using in the last 6 or 7 months. So the first thing that we're going to look at, and hope I can share my screen here. We're actually going to start with the landlord good standing form. Hope everybody can see my screen. So when participants are looking to move from one unit to another unit, Hopewell requires that they are in good standing with their current landlord. This is a two-step process. First, they must give you, the landlord, official notice that they want to terminate the lease, and that notice has to be in accordance to what the lease requires. So if your lease requires 30 days notice, if your lease requires 60-day notice, I know some leases that require 90-day notice in order to terminate the lease. Whatever that stipulation is in your lease with that participant is what they have to give you all. And also a copy of the notice must be given to HRHA, certifying that they have given you all notice. The second step in that process is the landlord certification of good standing form. So this form is what the participant will bring to you all, the landlords, to complete, basically certifying that they're in good standing with you. So some points to notice here is that did they furnish you proper lease, and when is the date? When did they delete the notification of termination? Did they? What is the effective date of the termination? are you allowing early release from the lease? This is a very important one. Do they owe any balances to you? And of course, asking if they're in good standing and if they have violated any of their lease terms, because all of these things, all program violations. So if any of these issues that are happening, we have to know, because this goes into whether the participant qualifies for what's called continued assistance, basically being reissued a voucher to move to a new unit, either inside Hopewell or use their voucher to go outside of Hopewell. And then on the second page of this form is you, the landlord, certifying whether you would allow an extension in case they need an additional 30 days before they move to a new unit, or if you were not, and they will vacate the unit on the original date of vacate, and then you, the landlord, and the participant signing and dating it. And once HRHA receives both the notice of the termination of the lease as well as his landlord good standing form, we will proceed with either issuing the participant a voucher or informing the tenant that they will not be offered continued assistance at this time for whatever reason that needs to be resolved before they can receive the voucher. I must say that this form is not necessarily a requirement for the tenant. This form will not hold up the tenant from being issued a voucher, but it's very important for HRHA so that we know who is not in good standing, because we don't want to offer continued assistance to participants that are not following the rules. And those rules include both following the rules of the voucher program, but also following the rules of your lease. So if they're not abiding by your lease, we don't want to offer them continued assistance to not abide by somebody else's lease rules as well. So while this form will not hold up the process, I do employ all landlords to definitely complete this form every time one of our participants bring this to you. So once they've, like I said, once the notice has been given and received by the housing authority as well as this form, the participant is issued a voucher and they'll begin the move process. And one of the forms that are given is this rafter package. And they're given this package to take to a potential landlord of a unit that they want to move into. So of course, landlords are very familiar with this package, and the first sheet of this package kind of details what forms are required to for this package to be considered complete. So new landlords, they're required to have more information as opposed to current landlords. So both sets are definitely required to have the completed document with all forms signed. A part that's always missed, and I really want us to get better at, is that the HRHA does require there to be an unsigned lease in the packet. So that's a big thing that's always missed, is that unsigned lease part. So the next part is either proof of ownership, if this is being rented directly from the owner of the property, or if this is being rented through a management company, we would like a copy of the management agreement between the management company and the actual owner of the unit, as well as all the completed forms in this packet. So on pages 2 and 3 is the official rafter form that is provided through HUD that needs to be filled out. On this page, you will fill out the unit address, the requested lease start date, the number of bedrooms, year constructed, proposed rent, the security deposit, and the date that the unit will be ready for inspection. You also provide the structure type of the unit, as well as if this unit is under any other types of subsidized housing. And the bottom portion of this form is when you fill out the utility chart showing who is responsible for paying for certain utilities. For heating, cooking, and water heating, you will check the box of what type of fuel type it is, whether it's natural gas, bottled gas, electric, heat pump, oil, or some other type of fuel type. You also provide who will be paying for any other electrical sources, water, sewer, trash collection, air condition, as well as providing who will provide the refrigerator and the range or the stove in the unit. On the next page, section 12 talks about providing comparables, unassisted units for actual comparisons of the rent. So the statement here says owners of projects with more than 4 units must complete the following section for most recently leased comparable unassisted units within the premises. And this section really helps when we're doing the rent reasonableness. Sometimes when we do conduct the rent reasonableness, the units may not always reach the amount that the owner or the property manager is requesting. And having these extra units here for unassisted units really help us as the housing authority justify the amount of rent that you want to charge for a unit for one of our participants or applicants. Let's see. At the bottom of this page, you as the owner or the management property manager will sign this section, and then the participant will sign this section right here. This next page is really specific to any units that were built before the year 1978. This is the certification of lead-based paint. You certifying that there is no serious issues of lead-based paint in the unit. So of course, if your unit was built on or after 1978, you would simply, I think it's a box that you would simply check stating that this report does not pertain to you. And if your unit was built before 1978, then you would check the box and also ensure that you're providing copies about the protect your family from lead in your home to the participant or applicant, so they know that their rights under this document here. This form right here is the general tax information document. You would complete this form with your all of your contact information, as well as information, your social security number or federal ID number. This form right here is the actual form that we use to do the comparables. So you would complete this form based on the unit that you are offering to our voucher holder. And this is the form that we would use to input into the affordablehousing.com website in order to verify that the unit is affordable, but not for reasonable here inside the city of Hopewell. This is the W-9 form that you will fill out for all of your tax information. If you elect, like Ms. Wilson, Lisa Wilson alluded to earlier, here at Hopewell, we really are stressing to move towards paperless communication. That does include pushing you, our owners and our landlords, to look at using direct deposit, as it is electronic. It doesn't, you don't have to wait for your payments to come through the mail. They'll be deposited into your bank account the next day. So if you do elect to want to transition to direct deposit, EFT payments from Hopewell, this is the form that you would complete in order to give us all of that information as well. And then this is the tenancy addendum. This is part C of the complete HAP contract. Notice it says up here, must be attached to all HCV leases. So every time that the official lease is signed between you and the applicant or participant, this part C must be attached at the end of the lease. And there must be it must be attached to both the tenant's copy and the landlord's copy that you have in your offices. So, and this is all of the full abilities of the rules that HUD is affording the tenant under the program. Any policies that they can use in order to have better living purposes within the HCV program. So I said this whole document is about 3 or 4 pages. It must be attached to every lease for all participants in our program. So that is the landlord packet. Next, we will talk about rent increases. So rent increases, they are anytime after the initial term of the lease, which we know that initial term must be 1 year. Anytime after that, the landlord is allowed to submit for a rent increase for any unit, for any household inside of the program. Those, according to our admin plan, that request must be received by Hopewell at least 60 days in advance of when that request is to go in effect. So if you want a rent increase to go into effect for, say, June 1st, that request must be received before April 1st in order to for proper processing. Hopewell, we do provide this form, this rent increase adjustment request form, and you're going to just fill it out with the current date, the tenant's name, the address, whether you want to increase or decrease the rent, the amount that you want to go to, the rent amount that you want to go to, and the effective date. And you would just put your name information down here at the bottom. We do provide this form as a way to help ease the process. I also know that some landlords, they have their own letters that also have the same information. Either one is acceptable, just as long. The biggest thing is that ensuring that both the tenant and the housing authority is being given the proper 60-day notice of the increase or decrease. So that's going to go into effect. So most definitely property management companies and even some private landlords have their own letter that they'll send. And like I said, that's also acceptable. And for anybody else that doesn't normally do rent increase process, we also have this form here, the rent adjustment request form, that you can definitely get from us and to use when you want to conduct those increases. I know I'm going kind of fast. Is there any questions so far? It's not. I will continue. So the next thing that we will discuss is the HQS inspections. So with HQS inspections, they're required at certain times. They are required before a HAP contract is executed, so before the tenant moves into the unit. They are required at periodic times. So with Hopewell, we're required to do our HQS inspections every 2 years, And they're also required at any time the tenant or the landlord requests what's called a special inspection. So anytime a tenant or a landlord have an issue in the unit and they want us to come to inspect, we're required to do an HQS inspection. And this is the actual document. And once again, this is another HUD document that you can find on their website. And this is the form that all housing authorities go by in order to conduct the inspection. So this first page is just the general information about the unit. It will list the PHA, the inspector's name, what type of inspection this is, the type of housing it is, as well as the actual unit and the family name, and also the owner or management company's name. And then we'll skip to this is page 4 here. And then that's when we really talk about the actual sections of the unit. So it's about 8 sections that we're required to inspect. So the first place we're required to inspect is the living room. The first question is asking, is there a living room present, as well as checking electrical hazards, working outlets, security, window condition, ceiling condition, wall condition, floor condition, Lead-based paint, that's another thing that we check for. And you'll find that most of these are quite repetitive and what we check for in each section of the unit. So the first place is we have to check for a living room in all of those conditions. And then we'll go and check in the kitchen, and we'll check for most of those same conditions. Is there a kitchen present? Electricity, electrical hazards, security, window conditions, ceiling, wall, and floor condition, lead-based paint. Is there an oven or a stove, and is it working? Is there a refrigerator? How is the sink? Is there hot water? Is there enough storage space for preparation of food? So those things that we check for in the kitchen. In the bathroom, we're still checking for most of the same things in the beginning. Is there a bathroom? Electricity and electrical hazards, security, window condition, ceiling, wall, and floor condition. Still checking for lead-based paint. Is the toilet flushing correctly? Is there a wash basin? And is the net producing hot and cold water? Is there a tub or a shower that's producing the hot and cold water? And this is an important one. Is there ventilation? So with the bathrooms, there either has to be an operable window in the bathroom, or there has to be a working ventilation system. And from what I recently took the actual HQS class, and there doesn't have to be if there's an electrical fan, the electrical fan doesn't have to be working as long as there's some type of system or a ventilation area that allows air to flow in and flow out. So we're looking for some type of opening that looks purposeful for a ventilation system. And then we start talking about other rooms. We're talking about bedrooms. We're talking about maybe a dining room. We're talking about a second living room or a den or a playroom. We're talking about hallways, entrances, staircases. And we're also talking about additional bathrooms. If a unit has 2 bathrooms or it has a half bath, we also have to inspect those areas. And once again, we're still checking for the same ideas: the electricity, electrical hazards, security, window, ceiling, walls, floors, lead-based paint. And this is where we start checking for smoke detectors. So the actual requirement for smoke detectors is a unit has to have one working smoke detector on each floor of the unit. So if a unit only has 1 floor, 1 story, it only needs 1 working smoke detector. If a unit has 2 stories, then a working smoke detector has to be on each floor of the unit. And recently, everybody received letters from me back in about October, November. HUD is now requiring that units have to have the CO detectors, and specifically the units that are required to have either those detectors or those alarms are units that either have gas as a fuel type in the unit or have an attached garage in the unit. So those things that we're going to start inspecting for now as well. If we either see that your unit, when you fill out the Rafter package, you're checking that the unit has gas in it, well, now you are required to have a CO detector or alarm. Likewise, if we go to the unit and we see an attached garage, now we're going to be looking for a CO detector or alarm in the unit. But we have to be, just want to reiterate, that's only for units that either have gas as a fuel type or have an attached garage on the unit. So that's section 4. Section 5 has us check for any other secondary rooms that were not listed in section 4, and basically checking for their electrical status and security, any other hazardous features. Section 6 is when we start looking at the exterior condition of the unit. We're looking at the foundation, we're looking at stairs and rails and porches, we're looking at the roof and the gutters, we're looking at exterior surfaces, we're looking at the chimney if there is a chimney. We're looking for, once again, we're still looking for the lead-based paint. And if this is a manufactured home, we're looking to make sure that it's properly tied down to the ground. Section 7 is when we start talking about heating and plumbing. We're looking for adequate heating equipment, heating safety of the heating equipment, adequate and ventilation of cooling, ensuring that the water heater is properly equipped, the water supply is properly coming into the unit, making sure that there's no major leaks, as well as making sure the sewer connection is proper for the unit. And then the last section is section 8, where we're talking about the general health and safety of the unit. We're going to make sure that there's good access to the unit, ensuring that there's good fire exits for the unit. There's no serious evidence of infestation. There's no collection of garbage or debris, as well as interior stairs and hallways. If it's an apartment building, making sure that that's hazard free. Make sure any other interior areas are hazard free. If the unit has elevators, making sure that those are up to code. Ensuring that the interior air quality is clean. Ensuring that the site and neighborhood conditions are free of hazards, and just a final check on any lead-based paint certification. So I'm going to show it's a slideshow that we present to our participants about the program, and it kind of lists, well, not kind of, it does list some common fails issues that we have with the inspections. So these are just some general fails that we see quite frequently within inspections. Often it's either missing or inoperable smoke detectors. The utilities are not on at the time of the inspection. It's very important to remember it is the owner or the management company's responsibility to ensure that all of the utilities are on at the time of inspection. I know a couple times landlords are requiring that the tenants are turning on the utilities for the inspection. And I don't know if that's a frequent thing or a common practice. It does seem kind of unusual to me, but at the end of the day, if the utilities are not on, the housing authority is going to penalize the landlord for not having utilities on, not the participant. And that's really for the pre-inspection, the pre-contract inspection. If the utilities are not on during the annual or the biannual inspection, and it's the fault of the tenants, then the housing authority will, of course, penalize the tenant for having the utilities turned off. Any inoperable windows, any locks are not working on the doors or the windows, floors, walls, or ceilings are not hazard-free, missing or inoperable appliances, no hot water, leaky faucets or drains, missing or broken receptacle covers, or common areas and outside of the unit building are not in clean, safe, healthy condition. So these are just some general common fails that we find happen either during the initial HQS inspection or during the biannual HQS inspection or doing any type of special HQS inspection. So those are just some things to keep to the forefront of your mind every time you're either preparing to give us a unit to inspect or we go out and do the biannual inspection. These are the biggest things that we're looking for. Does anybody have any questions about HQS inspections?
Hey, DeAndre, I have one. This is Shayna.
Yes, ma'am.
And Christy's downstairs in her office, so I apologize for not being able to ask her, but instead of just asking you. But did you guys are starting to outsource your inspections, right?
Yes, ma'am. So
do you want to elaborate on that just a little bit for those that work with you all that aren't familiar with that yet?
yes, ma'am. So around this time last year, we signed a contract with the group called the Inspection Group, and it's a company based in Pennsylvania, and they started doing all of our biannual inspections for us. So they've been doing them for about a year now, and basically they're following the same packet here, and they're doing the inspections for us, and they'll report the results to us, and then we report those results straight to you all the landlords. So it's it really is the biggest change is we're using them to assist us with conducting the inspections. And like I said, they're only conducting, at this present time, they're only conducting the biannual inspections. HRHA will still be coming out to do the initial inspection for when applicants or participants move into your units, as well as if any special inspections occur, we're still doing that. And so I know the participants have gotten really familiar with, it's a gentleman, now I don't remember his name. It's a gentleman that comes out and does the inspections with the inspection group.
So when we get, if we receive a letter,
Mm-hmm.
does the letter come from them or come from you all? As far as the findings, if there's any, like, because we get a letter whether they've passed or failed, right? The
Right.
inspection is passed or failed. So does the letter come from you all, or should we be on the lookout for a letter from other people?
It'll still come from HRHA.
Okay,
They
perfect.
they send me the results directly, and I put them in the system, and the letters are printed out to send directly to you all.
Well, I just want to take a second. I don't know when we're going to wrap up. I guess it's soon, but to tell you thank you for all that you have done since you have been on the team there at Hopewell. We have, on behalf of Parr and Abernathy and our owners and tenants, we've thoroughly enjoyed what you've been able to do to bring things where they need to be. So I know you still have some work to do, but we do appreciate what you've done. So thank you.
I thank you for that. I do appreciate that. I really have embraced the HUD mission of ensuring safe and healthy and decent housing for specifically low-income families, definitely elderly families, disabled families, and working families that don't make the income that not everybody else does. So I really want to make sure that they have the same affordability and opportunity that anybody else has. And I appreciate you all as our landlords for joining me in that mission for the city of Hopewell.
Well, the way you conduct the business makes a difference. And I think for those of us that work with multiple housing authorities, the ability to communicate with you, that we hear back from you, that you answer our questions. And if you don't have an answer, you let us know and you put us where we need to go. Where there are others that we work with that make it a little more difficult to be able to work with them so that it is one fluid mission. So that's where I applaud you. So you've done a great job since you've been on board.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have to chime in and second that one. I deal with a lot of cities, and I know I can always count on you, DeAndre. If I text you or I email you, it could be 7 o'clock at night, but you're going to get back to me. You're going to direct me where I need to go, and it is genuinely appreciated.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on top of things and being there when we need help.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So I had one more presentation, and that is our new landlord portal. So back in the beginning of September, HRHA transitioned, and I can pull this up here. HRHA transitioned from our old housing software systems to the Yardi housing software systems, and I can put up here, housing software systems. And a part of this meant that we transitioned from the portal that we used with our previous software company to the Yardi software company. And what that it means for you all as our landlords, it provides you all more functionality than the portal that you all had before. I know the portal before, it was really just logging in to see monthly payments. But with this new software company, it really gives us so much more. I can pull an example. Let's see. Who can I pick on? That's not what I wanted. I wanted to show what it looks like on the landlord side, if I can find the right. Is it this one? Oh, yeah, it's this one. So who can we pick on? Oh, I can do this one. Right. So the landlord portal here, maybe that's not going to do it right. What's his search? So the landlord portal, now with the Yardi system, like I said, it allows you to do so. I thought I cleared it out. Do that. The landlord portal here allows you all to do so much more. Why is it not one? I'm gonna have to click on something else. Let me go back. I'm sorry, you all. Technology doesn't like me now. Let's see what happens this time. All right. It's this as an example. So the landlord portal, it allows you all as a landlord so much, like I said, so much more functionality than you were afforded with our previous software. And specifically with this portal, it allows you to both view information as well as submit information. So these are all the towns that you will see once you log into the portal. And some important ones is such as the caseworker info. So you can look at all of your participants and you would see who is the caseworker that is assigned to their file, to their information. So anytime you need direct information about a tenant's payment, or maybe having issues with a tenant, or maybe you need updated information about maybe an inspection or something, you're able to go here and find who has been assigned to that person, and you can call them or email them directly to get that information. We'll go back here. And next is you'll be able to see your payments that have been made to you. So you go into the My Leisure tab, and it should show all of your payments that you have received from HRHA on behalf of each tenant. So it'll say the payment date that was made, it'll say for what address, it'll say the name of the participant, and it'll say how much was paid to you. This is your profile, so it'll list all of your contact information here. So list all of your information here. Yeah. This tile right here is unit inspections. And what I love about the unit inspections tab itself is this information, well, the whole portal itself is updated in real time based off information that we've logged into our end of the Yardi systems. So as information is happening on the input end with Hopewell, that information is instantly uploaded into the portal. So you receive information from us daily about all of these things, about the payments, about changes in payments, as well as updated inspection reports or inspection results and information. So you don't necessarily have to wait on not necessarily have to wait on a letter that comes in the mail about an inspection if you can already see it in the portal. What else you can do? You can upload documents and we will receive them directly within the what's called the site manager area. So you also have documents here that we can send to you, as well as you can upload documents here that you can send to us, and we'll be able to get them pretty immediately. If you wanted to switch or update your, if you're using EFT, direct deposit, you can update that information here. If you want to change from receiving paper checks to now receiving direct deposit, you can also use that tab to put in that direct deposit information there. So I'm really excited about the portal and what it means for both you all as our landlords, as well as our participants. They're able to update us, like I said, pretty immediately of any changes that happen in their household, as well as they can see their payments that we made for them, and they can see their inspection results that have happened from their units. And they're able to, like I said, report any changes, complete their annual recertifications, all within this portal. And they've been pretty responsive to most of our participants have been pretty responsive in using this portal and coming into the office when they need assistance with using the portal. So I'm hopeful that having this portal for both the landlords and the participants once again allows another area of paperless communication that can happen. And are there any questions about the portal itself? Okay, well, stop this. Let's see. Well, that ends today's conference. I'm glad everybody was able to attend today. I hope that between all of our presenters from Mally at Fair Housing, from both Tanika and Kalisha with Home, from Caitlin with the Central Virginia Legal Aid Society, I hope that you all were thoroughly educated, and it is my desire that you all have taken away at least one nugget of information that you did not know before. Like I said, this is something that we often do, that we've done every year since I've been here at Hopewell. Next year, we're gonna talk about maybe holding this in person again, and we'll see how that goes. And maybe we'll extend it from just a few hours to maybe an entire day to give our presenters more time to really give you all the knowledge that you deserve. When it comes to helping and assisting our participants and our applicants here in the city of Hopewell. So once again, I do thank everybody for coming today. And of course, if you have any questions, any issues, any concerns, you can reach out to myself or Ms. Williams or Pamela, and we'll be happy to help you all. I know Caitlin said that she was going to send me her slideshow to forward. So as soon as I get that, I will definitely send it out to everybody. And if Mally or Felicia or Tanika send me their slideshows, I'll be sure to give that to you all as well. So are there any other questions before we close?
No questions, but thank you for taking the time to put this together. I just did the fair housing thing earlier in the year, but it was nice to have a refresher, and then all the other information. It's nice to just refresh even if you've done it. So
yeah, definitely.
DeAndre, you had the person, Miss Warren, that wasn't able to be with us today to talk about the affordablehousing.com site. Do you think that you could do a follow-up to all of us with that information so that we can, because that's where you said you would like for us to start inputting our available rentals. That's the resource that you're directing voucher recipients to?
Yes, ma'am. I
Okay.
will, she communicates directly with Donna, and Donna wasn't able to be with us today, so I will follow up with both Donna and Elizabeth about, and we might can get Elizabeth to come on a separate day. And if she's able to, I will definitely send out a notice about that so you all can attend, and she'll be able to give an in-depth presentation of what the website does for does.
Perfect. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
You're welcome. Well, you all, I am finished for today. I thank you all for joining, and I hope everybody has a nice day.
You too. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.